All right. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, also co creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for your patience with us, trying to bring these shows to you guys. As you know, we had a double header of a strange, our review of Strange New Worlds, episode 1 and 2 of season 2. So we're going to dive into another show. If you guys, unless you guys have been living under a rock, you guys know that we have another MCU series that has just commenced as of this week, and that's none other than Secret Invasion. So, welcome to uh, episode 1 of the review series that I have coined as Extraterrestrial Spooks, Secret Invasion Talkback. Each week, I'll try to make a point of having some cool guests on tap for you guys to discuss the week's episode, and we'll try to have it every Sunday. Should that change, I will give you a heads up. But more than likely, we will have it Sunday mornings here in the East Coast, and it will also be Sunday mornings on the West Coast as well. Minus anything that may happen due to any unforeseen circumstances. But be that as it may, for every episode, I'm going to try to go into like a brief synopsis for you of what transpired in that episode. And then, we will have our guests on tap and we will really dig into some of the details of that episode, whether it's Easter eggs, callbacks, some theories, going forward. Believe it or not, I already have some theories. So I'm curious to know if our guest has some theories, even though we are only one episode in. But with that out of the way, let's get into some spark notes, so to speak. So, as I said, this week we had episode 1 of Secret Invasion, and there was a lot to glean of what went down. There's a lot of carryover from prior films that we've had in the MCU. There's in just thinking of what's come before, some good viewage to kind of give you an idea of what the landscape looks like, or what we're introducing the show would likely be the first Captain Marvel film, as well as Avengers Endgame, because with this series, it basically provides a through line of what has transpired in those films. And for Captain Marvel, and I apologize if I'm going into spoilers, but I mean the movie's been out for a couple of years. But for the first Captain Marvel film, we were introduced to Skrulls, which, if you're not familiar with Skrulls, they have that ability to be able to shapeshift into anyone. And by the end of that film, uh, Carol Danvers, as well as Nick Fury, had promised to find a home for the Skrulls, who it was a small band of them that were on Earth at the time, and so they were, as I said, promised to find a home for them. Now, by the time we are brought to the events of this series, nothing has really happened in that regard in terms of that promise that was made to the Skrulls. And Carol Danvers is off world, as she oftentimes is, and Nick Fury is still dealing with the the trauma of him being dusted in Endgame. So we open in this series, episode 1, of Everett Ross, who we last saw in uh, in in the most recent Black Panther in the sequel, and he's heading to a secret location to meet with an operative named Agent Prescott, who has some information that he wants to share with Ross regarding conspiracy that he has, or belief that he has in what is going uh, on Earth. And within that time, it becomes very clear that Prescott is convinced that in that 30-year span from what had transpired in Captain Marvel up until now, present day, the Skrulls have still been on Earth, and they become, relatively disillusioned with the fact that that they are still haven't been provided, a new home, based on, as I said, that promise that was uh, stated before, or provided before by Fury and Danvers. So, in that disillusionment, they are steadily trying to create conflict among different factions and different peoples among on Earth, so that way they can eventually, in time, take over Earth. And so we have a lot of elements that come into play of being introduced to characters that we know, and characters that we are just being introduced to, not just with Talos, who we recall from Captain Marvel, who initially we thought to be a villain, but come to find out that he's a Skrull who is he's quote unquote a good Skrull, who has honor, and has is only trying to look for the well-being of his family, and is not, as what we know in the comics, the Skrulls that we've come to know, from that source material, that can be, deceptive, devious, and all those things. And we also have, the other party as well. We have Gravik, who is acting on behalf of the Skrulls, who are disillusioned with, what had transpired before with Fury and with Danvers, and are making plans to, take over Earth. And over a series of events, we get introduced to not only Gravik, but we're also introduced to the daughter of Talos, um, known as I want to say Gaia. I may be mispronouncing that, but at this point in Captain Marvel, we were introduced to her as a child, but of course, as I said, there's been a 30-year span. So she's a grown woman now, and when we're beginning this series, she is with the disillusioned faction of Skrulls, because she in that time has become quite, I guess you can say, indifferent to what has happened in that span of not feeling that the Earthlings that she's come to know have kept up with their promise. So with that out of the way, oh, I'm sorry. Before I get into that, because there's a major thing that did happen. We did have a character death among what had transpired in this first episode, and that's none other than Maria Hill, who we know to be the right hand to Nick Fury, and that's where we're left off in this first episode. Now, I know I was going a little back and forth there, but mind you, this is our first episode, so bear with me. There were a lot of things that transpired, but as we get into the Easter eggs, as well as the callbacks, if you will, I'm sure we'll be able to fill in a few other little blanks that did go down within this episode, and how it gives us a picture of what the MCU looks like landscape-wise, not just now, but potentially how it could carry on into the future. But before I do that, I want to introduce my guests for this week. They are a hold on one sec. They are a good friend of mine, but however, they are also an accomplished filmmaker in the LA area. I want to welcome on my guest for this week, John Woodrup Jr. Let me bring him on. See if we can get this going here. John, hello. How are you doing, man?
Hey, I'm great, Brandon. How are you?
Good, good, good. So, And talking about this first episode, and I believe it's titled as Resurrection. And thinking of that kind of like in a figurative sense of what we have with the return of Nick Fury and him kind of getting reintroduced to the world, so to speak, and understanding where things are, as I said, landscape wise, because he's been, off world. He's been on Saber all this time. And we thought, up to this point that he's kind of been involved in a lot of the goings on post Endgame. But, anyone has been watching some of the films post Endgame, we know that Talos has basically been, subbing in for him, so to speak, in that time. So just initial impressions, what were your thoughts on this first episode?
Yeah, man. I mean, initial impressions, obviously excited for it. I mean, they've been teasing it for a long time,
Sure.
and it's supposed to give us a huge perspective into what we can expect with these like forthcoming projects and where they're going from here. So it was really fun to see these, the reemergence of Nick Fury and see some of the decisions they made. I personally was shocked just to see that he didn't have the eye patch on.
Yes.
Because I'm like,
yes.
Dude, in all the promotional campaigns, I mean, everything, they presented it with him with the eye patch. And so I'm a little bit like, okay, like, where's the eye patch? Why is he not wearing the eye patch? Like, what's the statement behind that? Like, what are they trying to communicate? This is obviously like a very conscious decision. So I was kind of hyped about that, man.
So it has been shared why that is the case of why he isn't wearing the eye patch, and I will attribute it similar to what if we're picturing another Marvel character, if we're picturing Blade, for example, his identity, or the iconography of that character is so synonymous with that eye patch, in the same way that we have a Blade with his glasses. And so him not wearing the eye patch, the idea behind that, from what I understand, is to humanize him in terms of providing some opening him up and providing some, what's the word that I'm looking for? Some
like vulnerability.
Vulnerability, yeah. Because in wearing the eye patch, we know that, okay, he's Fury, he's a badass, like, he's on his game, and by taking that off, it allows him to be more human, so to speak, and to make him more vulnerable as a character. Because, I mean, in this film, I should say in this episode, he's very much stripped down to like his barest bones. Like he doesn't seem like he's as physically capable, and I'm sure, eventually as the series goes along, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but that may change. But we noticed that that he is walking with like a limp, and he doesn't seem as sharp, which one of the characters actually addresses, a contemporary in his field addresses, is that he doesn't seem as sharp in terms of his ability to navigate the clandestine world. So
yeah, and I mean, some people, I mean, I feel like several characters brought it up, spoiler alert, but when he got in with like, thugs or the henchmen,
spoilers,
like
man.
they talked about it several times.
Go ahead.
Here.
Go for it.
But we're going for the spoilers.
All
right, cool. Yeah, so when the thugs nabbed him, when the thugs nabbed him, they're like, she's saying, hey, Sonya's saying, this never would have happened before. And he's like, well, maybe I let it happen. And then I feel like a few of the other people that he was collaborating with kind of alluded to like, are you up to this? And it was kind of interesting to see him in that weakened state. I thought he did a great job. I mean, his entire like stature had changed. He didn't speak the same. He didn't walk the same. He didn't hold himself with the same energy, but he did feel like the same character. To your point, he just felt diminished and beat down. Now, I thought the eye patch was a fascinating choice because to me, I hear what you're saying about like the representation of that character and his power, but I'm like, if he's feeling vulnerable and compromised, would he not want to hide that, like that perceivable weakness as opposed to expose it? And I thought that the choice in that was interesting myself.
No, for sure, for sure. And I do agree. You know, I understand what you're saying. I guess the only reason why I look at it, why I can see how they would picture it that way, is it provides it provides a window into all the stuff that that character is going through, and I feel by covering that up, it allows him to be shielded from that, where
Yeah,
you're seeing the the icon, or the figure, more so than understanding like what's going on behind the eyes. And by, even if the eye isn't like, you know, is down for the count, so to speak, and is not working, like, and it still provides a window into a life lived of what he's going through, even if we're
for
just looking
sure.
at the milked out eye like that. So
I like your use of the word shield in the
oh,
usage
I
of the
didn't
eye
even think
patch.
about that. Wow.
You didn't even know it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're throwing out those double meaning words right
Yeah,
there. But
there we
yeah,
go.
no, it was cool. Dude, I do have to admit, I geeked over the shot like after the opening credit sequence, and they cut to that, just like that nice shot in the woods at night, and you just see this beam of light come down and he
Yeah,
appears. They crushed that. I mean, that was a beautiful, impactful shot, and it was just such a great way to like reintroduce him on Earth. And he kind of comes down from the heavens in this like high status, powerful way, but then to see how diminished he is, I really enjoyed that and found that to be like very interesting and effective.
for sure, for sure. And you know, I feel like that's a great segue in going into, you know, callbacks and Easter eggs. As I said, you know, they they comment on some of the films that we've had previously in the MCU to kind of set the groundwork of where things lie now with Captain Marvel and with Endgame. And it's it's going to be fascinating to see how they continue to utilize the events of those shows, to, or those films, to provide a glimpse of, you know, the motivations with a lot of the characters. Because I mean, if it's if we're really picturing, you know, what's going on with, as I said, the disillusioned group of Skrulls, I like, one thing that I have enjoyed about Marvel is that oftentimes when there are expectations of what we come to know about certain characters, they subvert them a lot of times, or they go a different way, and somehow they still make their way back to what we know, but it's done in a way that makes sense, versus it just
Yeah.
being, you know, there just for the sake of being there. Like a couple of examples I can think of that is, if I'm picturing like the first Captain America movie, they had the quote unquote the comic book accurate costume in the film, but practically it doesn't work on screen. So they used it in a propaganda related show.
Yeah.
So it still allowed them to check that box of saying, you know, we understand, you know, what the source material is, but they adapted the actual suit, tactical suit that he had, because it made more sense in terms of how he would use it, or how it would be, you know, applied in a real life setting within the heightened setting of that film.
No, no, I love that, and I love that you bring that up. I think that that is actually one of the key philosophies that has allowed the Marvel universe to obtain the levels of success that it has. Because like when you think about translating some of these things from the medium of a comic book to live
Yeah.
action, there is a level of complexity in getting it to work effectively. You're exactly right. It's like, okay, how do we justify, you know, the suit that Captain America's wearing? How do we actually put Thor on Earth and get it to like not feel janky
And
and
have
weird? And I think
Asgard
what's
make
amazing,
sense.
yeah, and dude, they crush it. And I mean, even like with Iron Man, you know, it's like going back to like those first generation early films, they found the way to subvert it. They found the way to spin it or flip it to make it believable and make it work. And I think that people derive so much joy and pleasure from those decisions. that it really gave them the foundation to like build this entire universe, because it is so effective. And I do think that it'll be exciting to see how they lean on those philosophies and devices as this show unfolds. I mean, in the first episode, look, they were setting so much stuff up that we couldn't really, I personally didn't feel like I could really tap into these characters, relate to them emotionally, get behind any of them yet, because there was so much setup. But I think that that's where we're going to see in these later episodes, we're going to see a lot of those philosophies and fun devices set up for success, like as it plays out.
For sure, for sure. And in speaking, further to that of that same point, we saw it with Spider-Man. Like we've had all these things transpire, but now he's essentially back at square one of where we picture Spider-Man would technically be at this point, even though he has all this prior history based on what has transpired in the MCU. And in speaking of the Skrulls, we, customarily, if folks that know the comics, we already have a preconceived notion of how Skrulls should be. So it was a nice twist when in Captain Marvel we found that they were, in essence, refugees. And now, because of that disillusionment, of that bitterness, you can say, that has transpired over that time, which makes sense. Like, someone promised you, hey, like,
Yeah.
I'll be able to help you out. And like, they just kind of like go MIA and they kind of, flake on you. You might feel some type of way. So like that makes sense, even though they are becoming closer to what we, picture for the Skrulls that we know. That motivation,
Well,
there's a
yeah.
lot of layers to that motivation of how they became that way. So
Well, and that's what makes it beautiful, right? Like the thing that makes a villain enticing is understanding what caused them to embark upon that course of action. So, I mean, I'm with you. It's not just this like evil race of alien beings that decided to descend upon the earth. It's like they have a real motivation that's actually relatable to anybody that looks at the news or reads a headline in this day and age, and we can empathize with them and we can understand them. And that's where you do get a little bit of that complexity and that gray area that makes it so fascinating, where we can see these characters that are torn between these polarizing perspectives, and which way do they go. And I think that I was glad to see them do that, and like you said, kind of like how they built that intention and motivation in a way to create a lot of gray areas and a lot of room to play, which is perfect for this story because of their ability to change form. I mean, you really never quite know what is what and who is who. And I think that they're going to have obviously, they're going to have a lot of fun with that.
yeah, for sure. So, in thinking, of a lot of the callbacks and Easter eggs, were there some other like specific ones that came to mind for you where, maybe it was something that was alluded to that may come later, or even something that came before that they like, oh, they addressed that, like, cool.
So the thing that stuck out to me from the opening scene that came before their opening title credit sequence was how much it felt like Winter Soldier.
Yes.
And actually it felt a lot like Mission Impossible Fallout to me. Like
Yeah.
it felt like an espionage film. And so I think it's smart to lean into the political aspects of the Marvel universe, like after, the snap, and kind of see like what the consequences of that are. And I think that just the way they set this world up and feeling so much like Winter Soldier, to me, that in and of itself set a huge expectation for, where it's going to go. And I love how grounded in the real world it is. I love like the commentary on these terrorist attacks and this building tension and these devices that are pulling people apart and creating divisions. I think that Winter Soldier was, in my opinion, it's one of the best Marvel films. It's one of my favorite Marvel films because of the socio-political commentary and how we could relate it to what's happening in our world. And I was hyped to get that feeling in this because I feel like they're going to lean into it, which just makes it that much more relatable, impactful, and fun. So for me, even that, just the tone was a bit of an Easter egg.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna say, Them addressing, and I already mentioned, the motivation with our disillusion scrolls. Um, Thinking of where, I mean, and I didn't even talk about this in the synopsis, but where Rhodey is, as an advisor, and how that plays out, and how how the events of what has come before has placed them in that role. I'm sure they're going to go more in depth of how that came to be, and then in thinking further, the kind of the throwaway line of the conversation that him and Talos have, of having quote unquote a midlife crisis, and Fury saying that him assembling the Avengers was his midlife crisis, which was really hilarious. And I was trying to think, there was one other thing that came to mind too, in talking about like some of the things that they set the groundwork for, or callbacks. I'm sure I'll remember it, but if not, if you're ready, unless you had any other things that came to mind for you, I want to, believe it or not, get into some theories and some what ifs, because brain is already swirling in terms of some of the possibilities of what's at play, or what we could see.
Yeah, I kind of find myself leaning in that direction as well, because I feel like they teased so much stuff out that, there were little like lines and nuances and things here that could potentially like be connected to something. But there was so much that in a way you really kind of had to dig for it. You really have to think about it. And so I'm like you, one of the things I enjoyed about the show is it really left me with just thinking about like what if and what's to come, like what this basic premise like sets up. So I'm with you on that,
All right, cool. Well, I will punt the ball to you to start us off, sir. As our guest co-host, what are some theories that you have going forward?
So okay, I'm paranoid. I'm a paranoid person sometimes,
Okay.
and this show like is all about
Yeah.
paranoia. So now every character on screen, I'm like, no,
Right.
nah,
Right.
man,
Right.
that's not them. That's a troll. Dude, is Nick Fury even really Nick Fury?
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, it's like the guys are talking at the beginning, and they're going to get a message to Nick Fury, and how did that message get sent? Because spoiler alert, old boy kills dude, and then old
Right.
boy gets killed. Who
Right.
sent the message to Fury? How did it get there? Next thing you know, like he's beaming down. Hasn't been on Earth for how many years? And I'm sitting here now, like after I watched the whole show, and they kind of like, and what you were talking about with like the way Marvel's cunning and clever with the devices they play. Okay, so at the end, they had a big, huge sleight of hand where somebody took on his visage and tricked somebody as Fury. So now I'm sitting here at the end of the show like, wait a minute though. Like, is this really Nick Fury? Is this the Nick Fury we know? Because
Right.
everybody's even saying you're different, you're changed, you act different, you look different, you behave different, like you think different. So I'm seriously, I'm like, in episode 6, does it come out that he was a Skrull the whole time? Maybe.
Wow. Wow. That would be a major rug pull for sure. I guess some of the things that, in terms of what they seem to be setting up, and thinking of what's coming to us in the future. I mean, we have another Captain America film that's in production now as we speak. That was originally called the New World Order, but it's since been changed to Brave New World. But the idea is still there of the new landscape that we have with our MCU now, after Endgame, with now that all the debris has kind of settled, so to speak. Especially even with some of the newer characters that we recently were introduced to, whether it was Shang-Chi, whether it was Miss Marvel, and how they fit into this puzzle of where things lie. Um, and thinking of like the going to the source material of what was going down with Secret Invasion, and how that kind of shaped into another era of the comics known as Dark Reign. If anyone doesn't, not really familiar with Dark Reign or that era where, many of the villains ended up like taking over everything. And we had like different instances where villains that we've come to know, iconic villains, are taking like roles of power or positions of power. One thing that comes to mind for me is the Dark Avengers and Norman Osborn. I know we don't have Norman Osborn, but I have a theory that they're basically using what's her name? They're using Madam Hydra. They're using Val to fit that role, and basically now that we have what is it, the Thunderbolts coming, that the Thunderbolts will in essence be the Dark Avengers, that they'll basically
Yeah, dude.
play that role of Dark Avengers, because we essentially are having, because of what transpired in the Secret Invasion and everything that was discovered there, just as you said, there was paranoia within that world, and because of that, they allowed a lot of villains to take power because of that paranoia of what had been allowed to happen with the Skrull invasion.
Well, dude, and here's the other thing. I mean, into that point and setting stuff up. I wonder like how far are they going to go in this show, because it's like they're spending money on it. I mean, dude, the cast,
Yeah.
like the cast blew my mind. I'm like, you got to be kidding me! Like the Dragon Queen is in here from Game of Thrones, and
Yeah.
and Nolan Sorrento from Ready Player One is in here. Like they're dropping some coin on these cast members. So then to your point, it's like, okay, so what are they willing to show us in this show? Because it seems like they're not worried about expenditures. And dude, this is a stretch, but you know who's on Earth right now? Peter Quill, man. Star-Lord is on Earth right now. And so it's like, I find myself just being like, oh man, I would just love for him somehow to like tie Star-Lord in there just a little bit, or like have Rocket show up with the new Guardians. It's a stretch, but hey, it's like we're starting to like, I guess to your point, it's like the opportunity to like bring stuff in with what they presented is just like, it's literally unlimited. It can go anywhere they want it to.
For sure, for sure. And I guess the other thing too is, in thinking of what you were sharing with your theory, with how far is this, this conspiracy or all this going to go. I'm going to put it out there now, and I know a lot of people have, there have been some folks who have commented on it. I think it may go as far as the White House. I think it may go that far, and that's the reason. Because I'm trying to think of. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna get into some more spoilers, guys. So maybe if folks don't want to skip past this part, but I do have some spoilers that I do know of the new Captain America movie. And maybe I won't share with you, John, because I don't want to spoil it for you, because it deals with the political landscape of of Captain America. So I'll share it if you're willing. If not, then I will just save it for another day. But all I'll say is that we do have a new president. I know who it is, but I won't say who. We do have a new president in Captain America, and so, considering who we have, who becomes the president, that makes me wonder, is it based off the ramifications of what transpires in this show? So, and based
Well,
off of that, yeah, go ahead.
well, no, and to that point, it's like, look, I'm really curious to see like what they do with Don Cheadle's character. It's like, what's that guy's been around since the beginning, and it's like he always comes in some sort of impactful way, but like he hasn't ever really been elevated to that status where he's like the dude that's driving the story. He's always like a really strong, like integral supporter. So I'm like, what are they going to do with that character? It's like he's
Well,
listed
they
on the
are.
cast.
They are giving him something. He is. I don't know if you're aware of this. They do have. Originally, it was going to be a series. So Armor Wars was actually going to be a series, but they've since decided to, based off of some new ideas of how to expand that project, is going to. Last I heard, is going to be turned into a film, and that will actually see a return of Ultron. So it's basically like a
Nice.
legacy, the legacy of Iron Man and him trying to deal with the legacy of Iron Man and how that works. So he does have that coming. It was, like I said, it was originally supposed to be his series, but they decided to make it a full-blown movie. So he
See,
does.
that's cool. So we're going to see some stuff with him. And then I wonder too, you know, it's like what we're going to see, like if we're going to see Daisy Johnson, if we're going to see Sharon Carter, like again, tying back into that Winter Soldier stuff, the more political stuff, and some of those supporting characters that are very deeply ingrained in the political aspect of the Marvel universe, you know?
For sure. And MJ, you know, and talking about who I picture is going to be a scroll. I'll put it out here now. I could be wrong. Cheadle, Rhodey, maybe a scroll. The president, I'm picturing maybe a scroll potentially. Um, but in speaking of those OG characters, my only concern going forward is that there's a danger of using this scroll, you know, element as a gimmick. Now I hope it doesn't, you know, going forward doesn't get used as a gimmick or a quick way to explain away things when they're written in, you know, when the story is right when they've written themselves into a hole and they don't know how to get out of it in terms of how to explain it away, that it's just explained away simply by saying, oh, they were a scroll, or you know,
Yeah.
I hope it's done in a way that is effective and not just for gimmick's sake. So that would be one thing that I feel like there is a danger to get into, which is another reason why I'm not. I'll be honest, I'm not completely sold on the multiverse stuff because it gives a quick explainer or it gives an out to having characters come back, and I feel like you need to have, and again, I understand it's comic books, but you need to have that level of, what's the word, of having stakes, and continuously having characters come back, you know, takes that away. Even if you're saying that they're a variant, so to speak, I still feel like it takes away from, you know, that character's sacrifice or them making that sacrifice for whatever reason it was in a given, you know,
Yeah.
project. So
No, I agree. It becomes a cheat,
yeah,
you know. It's like if you and it also it kills the emotional stakes because you never know if something's a committed choice and if it has any real consequences. You know,
sure,
it's like I mean, the first time they killed Superman, dude, it's like they killed Superman, and then you know, ever since it's like, oh, we can kill characters and resurrect them as many times as we want. I mean, I felt a little bit like that, even kind of like with Gamora in Guardians of 3, which has me wondering, is she a Skrull? You know, it's like, because how did that work, man? Like, she wasn't a victim of the snap. Like, she's dead. She's gone. Like, and they just kind of like
yeah,
grazed over it. Like, I missed something.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how did Gamora?
Wow,
And then
wow,
here's the other thing that's
wow,
interesting to me about that is like, okay,
wow.
so what we saw in this episode where they bring a person in, they
Yeah,
take on like their visage, and then they also take on like their memories and they have some knowledge of like their knowledge and their memories. Okay, Gamora kind of was like, I don't remember anything. She's like, I don't remember anything about my love for Star-Lord. I don't remember our relationship. She's cold to like all of the Guardians and all of this stuff. So but then she had some knowledge of it. She had some context. So I'm like, okay, is she one of the OGs that could be a Skrull? Because otherwise, and to your point about cheating, I don't understand how or why they brought her back. Like, I just don't, and I might have missed something, you know?
I would agree with you. My only thing is, which is, I mean, there have been times where Marvel has slipped in terms of like continuity things or like time related things based on where things fall. I remember there was a situation with the first Spider-Man movie. Is you had me with everything you just said. My only thing that I'm thinking on that goes in conflict with it or is doesn't go with it is the idea that she fought like Gamora. So like even if you're taking away the
Yeah.
memories of that character, if I recall, when it comes to the scrolls, one thing that gives them away is the fact that they can't move like that character. And she very much, if we're trying to say that she's a scroll, she moved like Gamora, like
Yeah,
really well.
she
They had
did.
the whole fight at the end where she moved like Gamora, and then on top of that too, if we're thinking of like other OG characters, it would make sense if it's someone grounded like a Captain America or Winter Soldier,
See,
because that would make sense because
dude.
they have heightened strength. But like if it's like Captain Marvel or someone else where they have like beams coming out of their hands or they have to like repeat some
Yeah. That's
specific
true. That's true.
ability, then it may be a
But
little
dude,
trickier.
do you hear what you're doing right now? Like, you are completely supporting my theory that Nick Fury is a Skrull. I mean, everything you just said, like, basically supports it. I mean, even to like the difference in his physicality. And I mean, if you
Yeah.
think about it, dude, they drew attention to an interesting detail in the first episode that struck me. And I was just like, why did they feel like it was important to show that? And it's when Nick Fury, what's his face, his buddy, I'm sorry, I'm not good with the names, they were going to run down the art dealer Skrull that was going to give them the bombs.
Yes.
And Nick Fury is like, oh, damn, because the gate was chained shut. And the other dude just grabbed it and broke it
He's like,
off.
you don't
Skrulls are
remember that I could
strong,
do
right?
that? Yeah. I think that's what.
And so, yeah. So I'm like, I'm kind of find myself thinking too, I'm like, okay, so why do they feel the need to show that? And I mean, again, like Fury's in a compromised state, different things like that. And I mean, they made it this thing where Nick Fury's like, oh, there's a chain on a gate I can't get through. And the Skrull's like, I got you, and rips it off. I really think that they could do a like, with a real Nick Fury, please stand up at the end, where it's like we find out he was an imposter. The real Nick Fury ends up coming back and getting rid of the imposter or something. Like I feel like
I just hope that they, if that is the case, I hope that they figure out a way to have that make sense. Because I would feel, I would, I don't know if anyone else feel, I would feel cheated of like it not being Nick Fury that that entire time of like, gosh, so you telling me like this whole time you've been looking at it like an imposter? I mean, I know that's the whole theme of the show, but I don't know, like. It would be interesting if they really did a rug pull like that, because I guess the only other thing that I can think of in support of your theory is Nick Fury is always been someone, and it was mentioned in the show. He's someone that's paranoid. He's someone who is 2 or 3 steps ahead of what a lot of people are, and so I could see him do this. It's just a bummer if it is the case that just like he did with Talos, he sent another scroll down from Saber to be him, just so he could get a lay of the land of what's going on down there before he finally decides to go down there.
But that's interesting. Like, if he's the one that sent someone, it's like, I didn't even think about that. So you want to talk about being 2 or 3 steps ahead of the game.
Saber with all these scrolls, so like maybe he sent someone down there. But the only thing with that is like, why would he do that to Talos unless he thinks that Talos himself can't be trusted? So
well, and so then to that point, and I mean, again, the thing that I got hung up on was just both of the guys that were having the conversation about getting word to Nick Fury died. How did the message get to him? Like, there's a huge time jump there. It's like, we have to contact him. They agree on it. Next thing you know, they're both dead. We see them both die. And Nick Fury hits the ground.
Maybe he'll got to him, because I know that we had the whole sequence, the chase sequence at the top of the show, and she realized that she had been duped by someone who was supposed to be Ross. And so perhaps like in that inciting incident, that's when she, reached out to Fury. And because of him realizing that, something, deeper is going on that level of some of their own people being, infiltrated, that's when he made a decision to come down. Because I believe she has a way of contacting him. It's just that he hasn't been taking the call, or hasn't been.
Well, see, and
so you can,
and it could be too.
Do it either way.
Yeah, and it could be too, that maybe he wants to test, Talos's to see if he really is a good guy and on the right side, and if he's playing his cards straight and he's what he thinks, what Nick thinks he is. It's like I don't know. It's like I find myself thinking like, okay, like you said, it's like, okay, well, what's Nick Fury been doing for the past 3 years? Like, what's he doing on this planet? Like, and I mean, look, I'm sorry, but okay, in his character, like I get it, like the snap was like a huge thing and that can change somebody. But and you had kind of talked about this in them impersonating somebody. Like the character is still the character, the person's still the person. Like he can't help but be paranoid. He can't help but think 3 steps ahead of everybody. It isn't like it would have slowed him down, dumbed him down, made him soft or something like that. So it's like, I just feel like this is going to go one or two ways. We're either going to see a character evolution and transition where he gets back closer to his old self, or this is a plot. This is something that he has like, I love your idea that he sent this imposter.
He orchestrated something. Yeah.
I was thinking of it in my mind that it was somebody, a third party. It didn't have anything to do with him. And then he learns like somebody's impersonating me on Earth. I got to get down there. That's how I thought about it. I think your add-on to that theory is actually stronger and would make more sense. And personally, as long as Nick Fury was Nick Fury in all the previous movies and he wasn't an imposter the whole time, in my mind, I would not feel like that was a cheat. I would feel like it would be clever, but also I don't know if you can hold out to the 6th episode, because then we watch this whole mini series and it's like, oh, we were watching a fake. They might have to do it soon, but I think it could be a lot of fun, and I think there's a realistic possibility of it.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, there you go. We have some theories that are going there. I will give the nod to you on Nick Fury. So we will, we'll see what goes down, man.
Dude, and real quick, MJ just had What If Old Man Cap is a Skrull, and that's kind of an interesting idea as well.
It is, but I guess with that, kind of to speaking to what you were talking about before, that's an interesting idea, but we haven't been introduced to how he fits into the current MCU right now. So just having him be a Skrull,
Yeah, it's true.
What
It needs
reason
more
would it?
setup.
For what reason would it serve?
Yeah, needs a little more setup. I think though that the episodes are going to get even more enjoyable than the first one, just because the first one, I mean, they've got a huge job to, set all of this stuff up. And I feel like that this is a show that's going to start very broad and it's going to like narrow as we go through these episodes. It's going to get more personal. It's going to get more emotional. It's going to get easier to understand these characters' intentions and motivations, or what we think they are, and get behind them. I do think that it's going to be a good ride. I think the first one for me, that was a lot of setup. You got to be a little bit patient watching it, to get through all this setup, but I think it's setting up for a wild ride.
I was gonna say for sure. So with that being said, I feel like it's a great way to close it off. So I'll punt it over to you to share where folks can find you.
Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is on Instagram. I'm at the real John Woodruff, just like right below me here. Hit me up there. I'm always up for a conversation. I can fill you in on what I'm up to. Brain and I actually met after the release of my last feature film, Animal Among Us. It's still on Tubi and Prime if you want to check it out for free. Yeah, and then I'm deep in development on my second one. Have an option agreement on the script. Looks like we're getting ready to bump into production as soon as I get script approval. So I'm super stoked about that, and it's a really nice step up from the last one. So busy with that, but yeah, hit me up and keep tabs on what's going on.
All right, awesome. So I want to thank John so much for hopping on and talking episode 1 of Secret Invasion with me. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, also co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me down below at Brandon Choi ENT on Twitter and Brandon Choi _ENT on Instagram. As I said, you can look for us every Sunday, talking about each of the episodes of Secret Invasion. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there and see you soon. Peace.